The gun barrel pressed against Clara Dawson's spine was still hot from the last man it killed. She didn't scream, didn't beg, just stood there in her empty kitchen, wooden spoon trembling in her hand while the stranger's breath, ragged, desperate, warmed the back of her neck. Outside, the Colorado wind howled like a dying animal. Inside, silence, except for the sound of blood dripping onto her clean floor. "Don't turn around," he said, his voice cracked, not with cruelty, but exhaustion. "And don't scream or I'll—" But he didn't finish, because when Clara finally spoke, her voice was steady as stone. "You're bleeding on my floor. 5 years she'd lived alone in that cabin. 5 years since her husband died in the mines. 5 years of empty beds and colder nights, and now on a February evening in 1883, an outlaw with a bullet wound had stumbled into her life, gun first. What happened next would change everything." But before we get there, if you want to hear how a widow's loneliness and a wanted man's desperation became something no law could touch, hit that like button. Subscribe, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why some redemptions can only happen in the dark. His name was Jesse McGra, 29 years old, wanted in 3 territories, $8. 100 on his head, dead or alive. But Clara didn't know that yet. All she knew was the weight of his Colt revolver against her back, the way his hand shook when he gripped her shoulder, the smell of gunpowder and sweat and winter cold clinging to his clothes. When he finally let her turn around, she saw him clearly. Young dirt-smeared, eyes dark with pain and something else, fear maybe, or shame. The wound in his shoulder was bad, not fatal, but close. The bullet had gone clean through, but the bleeding hadn't stopped. His shirt was black with it. "Sit," Clara said. Jesse stared at her. "What? Sit down before you fall down. You want to die standing in a stranger's kitchen." He wavered, then his knees buckled and he collapsed into her wooden chair. The gun clattered to the floor. Neither of them reached for it. Clara moved without thinking. Heated water, found the whiskey Henry kept hidden in the cupboard, untouched for 5 years, tore clean linen into strips. Her hands worked fast, efficient. She'd sewn up a horse's leg once. How different could a man be? When she poured the whiskey over the wound, Jesse bit down on his own fist to keep from screaming. His body went rigid. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and Clara felt something stir inside her that she thought was long dead. Not pity, not exactly, more like recognition. This man was alone, just like her. "Why are you helping me?" Jesse gasped. Clara threaded the needle. I don't know, but she did know. She just couldn't say it out loud. Not yet. Jesse stayed in the shed behind the house. It was small, just a bed, a stove, and the ghost of Henry Dawson lingering in every corner. Clara brought him food, changed his bandages, didn't ask questions. The first 2 days they barely spoke. Jesse slept most of the time, his body fighting the fever from the wound. Clara came and went like a shadow. Left soup, fresh water, clean bandages, never stayed long, but on the 3rd morning something shifted. She found him trying to stand, one hand braced against the wall, face pale with effort. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply. "Need to check my horse. Your horse is fine. Sit down before you tear those stitches." Jesse lowered himself back onto the bed, jaw clenched. "I'm not used to being helpless, neither am I." Clara sat down the breakfast tray, but sometimes we don't get a choice. He looked at her then, really looked, saw the lines around her eyes, the gray threading through her dark hair, the way she held herself like a woman who'd learned not to expect anything from the world. "How long since your husband died?" 5 years. "You never remarried?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "Who would have me? A childless widow with nothing but a failing ranch and a reputation for being difficult." She poured him coffee. "Besides, I wasn't interested. And now the question hung in the air between them. Clara didn't answer, just handed him the cup and left. By the 4th day, Jesse could walk without help. Clara found him in the stable, brushing down his mare. His movements were careful, favoring his injured shoulder, but there was a gentleness in the way he handled The animal that surprised her. She's beautiful, Clara said from the doorway. Jessie looked up, raised her from a foe, saved up 3 months' wages to buy her off a rancher in Texas. He ran his hand down the horse's neck. She's the only thing in this world that's mine. Clara understood that the need to own something, to have something that couldn't be taken away. She stepped into the stable. What was your life like before I killed a man, became an outlaw? Jessie's smile was rueful. Nothing special. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, slept under the stars more nights than in a bed. He paused. I was never good at staying in one place. Why not? No place wanted me to stay. Clara felt that truth like a punch to the chest. She knew what it meant to be unwanted, to be tolerated, but not treasured. Henry had been a good man, but he'd married her because he needed a wife, not because he loved her, and when he died, she'd mourned the loss of companionship more than the loss of love. Tell me about him. Jessie said quietly, your husband. Clara was surprised by the question. No one ever asked about Henry any more. He was steady, reliable. He worked hard in the mines and came home every night smelling like sulfur and rock dust. She leaned against the stable wall. We didn't talk much. He wasn't cruel, just absent. Even when he was sitting across from me at dinner, he was somewhere else in his mind. Did you love him? I thought I did. Or maybe I just loved not being alone. Clara's voice dropped, but when he died, I realized I'd been alone the whole time anyway. Jessie put down the brush, turned to face her. That's the worst kind of loneliness, being with someone and still feeling like you're by yourself. Their eyes met, and in that moment Clara saw it, the reflection of her own isolation in this stranger's face. This outlaw, who stumbled into her life with a bullet wound and a price on his head, understood her in a way Henry never had. On the third morning she mentioned Sheriff Tate. He comes around sometimes, she said, her voice carefully flat. They were sitting at her kitchen table the first time Jessie had been inside the main house. She'd made eggs and biscuits, and they ate in comfortable silence until she spoke, checking on me, making sure I'm safe. Jessie caught the way her jaw tightened when she said it. He bothers you, it wasn't a question. Clara stared at her plate. Henry owed him money, $1.40 for fixing the roof. He died before he could pay it back. She pushed her food around with her fork. Tate thinks I should settle the debt another way. Jessie's hand curled into a fist. He's touched you, tried. I keep my rifle close when he visits. She looked up, met Jessie's eyes. I'm not helpless, but I'm tired of being afraid in my own home. Jessie leaned forward. If he comes while I'm here, you'll do nothing. Clara said firmly, you shoot a lawman, even a corrupt one, and you'll hang. I won't have that on my conscience. But Jessie didn't agree, and they both knew it. That afternoon, 2 bounty hunters rode up to the ranch. Clara was hanging laundry when they arrived. Men with hard eyes and nervous trigger fingers. We're looking for a man. One of them said, outlaw, wounded, riding a brown mare. You seen anyone like that? Clara's heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained calm. Just me and the chickens out here. The second hunter narrowed his eyes. You mind if we look around? I mind very much. This is private property. Ma'am, we got a legal right. Clara stepped toward them, arms crossed. You got a warrant? No. Then you got nothing but the road back to town. From the shed, Jessie watched through a crack in the wood. His hand was on his Colt. One word from Clara, and he'd have to shoot his way out or die trying. His finger rested on the trigger. 2 men, 2 shots. He could do it, had done it before, but Clara didn't say a word. The bounty hunters exchanged glances. One of them spat tobacco juice into the dirt. All right, ma'am, but if you see anything suspicious, you report it. There's money in it for you. I'll keep that in mind. They circled the property once, then rode off. Clara didn't move until they were gone. Then her knees buckled. She caught herself on the clothesline, breathing hard. When she finally made it to the shed, she found Jesse standing, his gun still drawn, his chest heaving. "You could have turned me in," he said. $800. That's more than you'll make in 2 years. I could have. Why didn't you?" Clara met his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt something crack open inside her. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted." Jesse lowered his gun slowly. "You ever killed a man, Clara?" "No, but I've wanted to." That honesty hung between them, raw and real. That night she changed his bandage again, but this time her hands moved slower, lingered on the edges of the wound. Traced the line of his collarbone. Jesse's breath hitched. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently wrapped around her wrist. "You're healing well." Clara whispered, "Thanks to you." She should have pulled away. Should have kept the distance that propriety demanded, but she didn't. Instead, she let her fingers trail down his arm, feeling the rough texture of scars from old fights, old wounds, old lives. "How long you been alone?" Jesse asked quietly. 5 years, me too, my whole life." The fire crackled in the stove outside, the wind screamed, but in that small shed, something warm and dangerous began to grow between them. Jesse's thumb traced circles on her wrist. "I'll be gone soon, wounds almost healed. I know, you want me to go." Clara looked at him, at this man who'd crashed into her life with violence and blood. This man who looked at her like she was more than just a widow, more than just a lonely woman in a failing ranch. "No," she whispered, "I don't." And that admission, that single word, changed everything. Sheriff Hiram Tate arrived on a Thursday. He was drunk. Clara could smell it before he even got off his horse. That sour stench of whiskey and bitterness. His eyes were bloodshot, his grin crooked. "Clara," he drawled, climbing the porch steps uninvited. "Heard there's been outlaws around. Thought I'd check on you." "I'm fine, Sheriff. You can go." But Tate didn't go. He stepped closer, too close. His hand reached out, fingers grazing her arm. "Your husband owed me money, Clara, $40. Been 5 years now. I think it's time you settled up." Clara jerked away. "Get out." Tate's grin vanished. His hand shot out, grabbed her by the collar. "You think you're too good for me, you think." The shed door slammed open. Jesse stood there, cold raised, eyes cold as January. She said, "Get out." Tate spun around. Recognition flashed across his face. McGra. He laughed, a low, nasty sound. "So she is hiding you. You know what that makes her, boy. An accomplice. I'll hang her right beside you." He reached for his gun. Jesse was faster. The shot echoed across the empty hills. Birds scattered from the trees. Smoke curled from the barrel of Jesse's Colt. And Sheriff Hiram Tate collapsed on Clara's porch, blood spreading dark across the wooden planks. Silence. Clara stared at the body, at the man who tormented her for years, now crumpled and still. Then she looked at Jesse, this outlaw who'd killed for her without hesitation. "We have to bury him," she whispered. They dug the grave deep in the woods behind the ranch. Didn't speak, just shoveled dirt in the freezing dark until the hole was deep enough to hide a man forever. When it was done, they dragged Tate's body through the trees and dropped it in, covered it, smoothed the earth, left no marker. Back at the house, Clara scrubbed the blood from the porch while Jesse unsaddled Tate's horse. They worked in silence, moving like ghosts through their own lives. Inside, Jesse began packing his saddlebag. "You're leaving," Clara said. "Not a question. I have to. When they find Tate's horse wandering, they'll come here. If I'm gone, you can say that you forced me, that I was scared, that I didn't know." Clara's voice was hollow. "I know the story, Jesse." He looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd saved him, hidden him, lied for him, who was about to lose everything because of him. "I'm sorry." He said, "Don't be. They didn't sleep that night." Clara built up the fire. Jessie sat beside her on the floor, close enough that their shoulders touched. The heat from the flames painted their faces in gold and shadow. Outside, the world was frozen. Inside, something thawed. "If there was another way," Jessie started. "There isn't." Clara turned to face him. In the firelight, she didn't look like a grieving widow anymore. She looked like a woman on the edge of something wild. "This world doesn't make room for people like us." Jessie's hand found hers, rough palm against rough palm. "I'll remember you," he said quietly. Every day Clara closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. And then Jessie pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her like she was something precious he was about to lose. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding on, and then Clara turned her face up. Jessie's breath caught. Their eyes met in the firelight. A question asked and answered without words. His hand came up to cup her jaw. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. She leaned into the touch, hungry for it, starving for it after 5 years of nothing. When their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate. 5 years of loneliness crashing together. 5 years of cold beds and empty arms. She pulled him closer, fingers tangling in his hair. He kissed her like a drowning man gulping air, like she was the only solid thing in a world that wanted him dead. They pulled apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing hard. Clara, his voice was wrecked. She didn't let him finish, just stood, took his hand and led him to the bedroom. The room was dark, except for the sliver of moonlight through the window. Clara's fingers trembled as she unbuttoned her dress. Jessie's hands covered hers, stilling them. "You don't have to. I know." She looked up at him. "I want to." The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. Jessie's breath hitched. She stood before him in just her mise, the thin fabric barely hiding the curves of her body. His eyes traced the line of her neck, the swell of her breasts, the dip of her waist. "You're beautiful," he whispered. No one had called her beautiful in 5 years. She reached for him, pulling his shirt over his head. Her hands explored the planes of his chest, the hard muscle, the bandage she'd tied just days ago. He shivered under her touch. They fell into bed together, a tangle of limbs and heat and need. Jessie's mouth found hers again. Then her neck, her collarbone lower. Clara gasped, arching into him. His hands roamed her body like he was memorizing every inch. She pulled him closer, wrapped her legs around him, whispered his name like a prayer. When he finally moved inside her slow and deep, Clara cried out, not from pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming relief of being filled after so long empty. They moved together in the darkness, finding a rhythm as old as time. His hands gripped her hips, her nails dug into his shoulders. They chased release together, desperate and raw and real. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweatless, licked and breathing hard. Jessie's arm around her waist, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "Stay," she whispered into the dark, but they both knew he couldn't. Jessie left before sunrise. Clara stood on the porch in her thin nightgown, watching him saddle his horse in the gray Prede. On light. The cold bit through the fabric, but she barely felt it. He swung up into the saddle, looked down at her one last time. "I'll write to you when it's safe." Clara nodded, couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she'd beg him to stay, and that wouldn't be fair to either of them. Jessie touched the brim of his hat. Then he spurred his horse and rode south toward the border, toward Mexico, toward a life she couldn't follow. Clara watched until he disappeared into the morning mist. Then she sank down onto the porch steps and sobbed, great heaving cries that she'd held back for 5 years. She was alone again. 1 year later, February 1884, the same bitter cold, the same empty ranch, but something in Clara had changed. She still fed the chickens, still sold eggs in town, still slept alone, but there was a lightness to her now, a small secret smile that touched her lips when she thought no one was watching. No one ever found Sheriff Tate. The town assumed he'd run off with tax money, wouldn't be the first lawman to disappear into the territories with full pockets. Then on a bright winter morning, the mail-writer brought a letter, no return address, no postmark, just her name in rough handwriting on the envelope. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. Inside a letter and $2 in bills. Clara, I'm writing from a place where no one knows my name. Made it to Mexico. Got a small spread in the Sonora Highlands. No law here. No bounty hunters, just mountains and wind and quiet. I think about you every day, about that cabin, about the last night by the fire, about the way you looked at me, not like an outlaw, but like a man. The money's a start. I'll send more each month from honest work I've found down here. I owe you more than my life. If you ever want to leave that place, leave the loneliness and the memories, come to Sonora. Ask for Javier Morales in the village of San Miguel de Horcas. That's the name I use now. I don't dare hope you'll come, but if you do, I'll spend the rest of my days making sure you never have to be alone again. The man who remembers you. J.C. Clara read the letter 3 times. 4. Her tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. Then she stood, walked into the bedroom, opened the old drawer where she kept her wedding ring, the gold band she'd worn for 5 years, even after Henry died. She held it up to the morning light, studied it, then slowly, deliberately, she slid it off her finger and placed it on the table. She stood there for a long moment looking at the ring, the symbol of her past, her prison, her grief. Then she turned her back on it and walked out of the room. Clara Dawson stood on her porch, staring south toward the distant horizon. The letter from Mexico was clutched in her hand. The wind pulled at her hair, tugged at her skirts. Behind her, the ranch, the chickens, the memories, everything she'd ever known. Ahead, the unknown, a new name in a new land, a man waiting in the mountains, a life she'd never dared imagine. For 5 years, she'd been a ghost. But one man, an outlaw with a hot gun pressed to her back, had shown her what it meant to feel alive again. Did she have the courage to go, or would she stay here with the ring and the memories and the safe, small life she knew? She didn't know yet, but for the first time in 5 years, she had a choice. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more tales of redemption and forbidden love, and comment below. Where are you watching from? What would you have done in Clara's place? Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to live again. Thanks for listening. Until next time.